Hello and welcome back to another episode of Medusa's Kitchen. I'm your host, Chef Greg. Today we're making Sicilian fillets with whipped potatoes and sauteed collard greens and mushrooms. And we're going to get started. Right now I've got my pot of oil to pan fry my fillets in. It's heating up. I've got some potatoes boiling, which are about 10 minutes out. I've cut them in half, and I'll show you right at the point you want to get these potatoes off. And the cream and the seasoning for the potatoes has heated up on the stove here. I'm using heavy cream and unsalted butter with a little kosher salt and a touch of my homemade hot sauce, which is basically 14 different spicy peppers, dried, fresh, canned. Jalapenos, serranos, anchos, guajillas, just chipotle peppers, cayenne pepper, red pepper, a little bit of garlic. So anyways, cook that with salt and vinegar, and we'll have that recipe coming down at you in the near future. But I've got this pan on right now for my mushrooms, and I want to get those going right away while we're doing this. So I'm using a little avocado oil because that's a high smoking point oil without any flavor. And I'm going to slice my mushrooms. And when you're slicing mushrooms, if I was to do this in slow motion, what I'm actually doing is I'm rolling the mushroom as I slice. So it makes it easier to hold on to the mushroom while you're slicing it. You can see my oil is smoking, so I'm going to get some mushrooms in there right away to get this thing started. Mushrooms are almost impossible to burn because they have 85% moisture. That mushroom was a little dirty, so I just break it off. You don't really want the dirt from the mushrooms because you know where they come from. But you want the pan blazing hot. Get a nice sear on these mushrooms. You can hear it when it hits the pan. And we'll get these going because they need time to cook. What we want to do is, I have friends over tonight, and I just got to ask the question: how do you time everything to come out at the same time? Well, I'm showing you how to do it right now. You cook the things that take the most time first, and you cook the things that take the least amount of time last. So, mushrooms are going, potatoes are almost there, 5-10 minutes. We'll take a peek at them. Basically, you want to be able to stick a fork in them, but you don't want them to be falling apart. They're perfect right now. Now, mashed potatoes or whipped potatoes need to be drained, and then you let them sit for 10 to 15 minutes so they get rid of all that steam and water that's inside the potato, so it'll take in all that heavy cream and butter that we've melted. So, this is a step where a lot of people miss this step. Let those potatoes steam. Let all that water come out of the potato. Have you ever had a baked potato right out of the oven and you open it up and it's fluffy and it's delicious, and you throw butter in it and it just sinks in there and soaks it up? It's because it's letting out its steam and you're putting butter back into it. As the potato sits, because of the skin, it starts to get gluey and wet. So, boiled potatoes. Potatoes that are cut in half, start in cold water, usually take about 40 minutes. When they're whole, which is how I did them at the restaurant, was about 50-55 minutes. I like doing them whole because it ensured that I had a dry potato at the end of the day. The smaller you cut your potato pieces, the more that you risk getting too wet of a potato medium. So I would suggest leaving them whole. Today I cut them in half because I wanted everything to move along here. So the fillets are going to take about 12 minutes. I'm rolling them in my seasoning, and you can use your own seasoning. Seasoned salt, garlic salt, onion powder, ground cumin, steak seasoning, Montreal seasoning, a combination of all of them, salt and pepper. But the idea is to cover the whole fillet. completely. Then cover it in flour, pat it off, and set this into a pan of avocado oil that's about 350. You want to do these one at a time, because if you threw them all in there at the same time, it would boil over, and you don't want that sort of a mess on your oven. And if sticking them in there by hand concerns you, you can obviously use the tongs. And you know, if the oil is too hot, don't get excited. You just turn the heat off. Don't forget to turn it back on in a minute or so. You know. So we've got the final fillet ready, but this is still boiling pretty hard, so I want to leave it. I don't want to add it just quite yet. So while that's cooking, get my hands cleaned off here. Give my mushrooms a toss. You know, I don't like to put the garlic and the seasonings and all that stuff at this point, because all we're trying to do is get the mushrooms to release their moisture and reduce that mushroom juice and the mushroom flavor. We're building flavor here. We're concentrating it. So that's why we got it covered, because we want to get this to where it's really hot. Then we'll take the lid off and we'll let it cook the rest of the way. Now this oil looks like it's ready for my third and final fillet. I invented this steak when I saw a version of it done at a restaurant that I worked at, and I said to myself, this could be really good. It needed a really good butter. It needed to be finished off with lemon. It needed a better seasoning. And so I kind of refined the recipe a little bit that I had learned at the place I was working, and it's been a staple on every menu that I've done since the 80s. So, all right, I'm turning my oil back on low because I see that it's not boiling as hard anymore. So I got it back on, so we're back to cooking. We're about 10 minutes away from medium rare at the most. Potatoes are in the sink. They've been in there about 5 minutes. So while that's all going, to keep up with my my process here, I'm going to grind a little fresh black pepper, and you know how I feel about that. I like my pepper freshly ground because you get those citrusy tones. It's just very perfumey. The flavor is 3 times as strong as it is, you know, so if you don't have a mortar and pestle as nice as this one, you know, a pepper grinder is fine too. So we're making the butter for the top of the fillet. It's black pepper. It's very simple. It's black pepper, some garlic. You know, you've seen probably on many shows Oh, and I just noticed that I'm doing something against the code here. And I did that on purpose because I didn't know if anybody out there was noticing, but I was using my red board instead of my green board. So, you know, we always use the green board for veggies, yellow board for chicken, red board for meat, white board for fish, and green board for vegetables. You know, and the garlic doesn't need to be ground very fine. And I don't put any salt in this garlic butter. I have a couple sticks of butter that I've had sit out pretty much most of the day. And now in the restaurant, when I used to make garlic butter, I would put the parsley in a blender with a little bit of water. And I think that we're going to do that today since we've got the time. We got a little NutriBullet You could also put the garlic in if you didn't want chunks of garlic, but in this application I do. Just a splash of cold water. We'll give it a little shot in the blender. And what we have is something that's going to give our butter a really great parsley flavor and change the color. I don't like to use salt in this garlic butter. I never salted my garlic butter at the restaurant because we've got all that salt on the steak, so we didn't need it. So all we've got in here is black pepper, parsley, garlic. You can see how that pureed parsley is giving that butter a nice, and it's going to look really good on our platter when we do it. This is a compound butter. Now when we made this at the restaurant, we put this in a mixer and we mixed it until it was twice its volume. And what was nice about that is not only did it have all that flavor, but when it melted on top of a steak, it didn't like roll off all greasy. It was all foamy because of all that air in there. So that was really nice. Let's take a look at our filet. Got a neat little tool here for that. Oh, that's looking really good. I think we're getting awful close there. I think I'm going to let that one out to let it rest, because anytime you're cooking beef, you need to let it rest at least 5 to 10 minutes. You know, that's why it was always hard in a restaurant to get temperatures to the way people liked it, was they weren't patient enough to let it sit in front of them, you know, and only in the finer restaurants where everybody's not in a hurry, they'll rest the steak in the kitchen. But you know, you got high turnover type of restaurant, it's difficult. Okay, so mushrooms, you can see most of the liquid is gone now. You know, we're going to add a little butter. We're going to add a little lemon, which keep the brightness in this. Now we're going to season it. A little black pepper. A little kosher salt. I always like to use kosher salt over iodized salt because it's less salty and it melts nicer. And then I've got some collard greens that I boiled 40 minutes and then chilled. I love collard greens, and there's more ways to eat collard greens than just cooked with a ham hock. I love soul food and I love that dish, and I love beans and rice with collard greens, but collard greens done this way, it's like a meaty spinach is what this is like. And it really, yeah, I used to use escarole and romaine leaves. When we made the Caesar salad mix at the restaurant, we would clean the outside leaves, and then we'd chop, after we washed that up, we'd save the cores for the Caesar salads, and then we'd save the outside leaves and chop them up and mix that up with spinach. So then we would saute all that, so we used 100% of the romaine. But the customers got the hearts for the Caesars, and we got the outside leaves to be the sauteed bed of greens. Oh, that's looking good. That's about a couple minutes away. All right, we'll get this out of the way. We'll bring this in. Chad, can you hand me a new plate? Oh, actually, no. I'm going to use this one here because we've already got it juiced up. I'm going to set this out here. You can see that. Okay, good. So we got the base of the collard greens, and all we did was heat up the collard greens in with that cooked spinach. Now we have the potatoes, which have been steaming off. They stopped steaming, but they're still hot. Another key important thing here is I've got the heavy cream with the butter, the salt, the hot sauce already seasoned for the potatoes. You know, I used 4 large potatoes, and you figure about 3 ounces of cream for each potato. And about 1 ounce of butter. Now, I've made these so often that I'm usually pretty close on it. Another thing about mashed potatoes or whipped potatoes, if you over mash them, they turn into glue. Another reason why you want this cream warm, it helps break the potato down after it's steamed off. But now everything in this potato is heavy cream. There's very little moisture. Now, there are some purists out there, the French. They'll put their potatoes through a potato ricer, and they'll come out, and there won't be a single lump. And those are delicious. That's great. This is more country-style rustic. This is mashed in the pan. All right, you know what? I am going to take one of those big Medusa platters because I want to show off a little trick here. Let me take this filet out. Set that over here to rest. I'm going to set this out of the way. Nice, thank you. Appreciate that. All right, we're going to set this right here. That's my dog Vito. He's getting a little restless. He can smell the fillets. So I take my beautiful whipped potatoes and, of course, as we go, we want to make sure that everything tastes okay. There's enough salt. Perfect. Okay. And, you make sure that when you're tasting things, you know that the potatoes are nicely seasoned. So your vegetables can be very, mild. They don't have to be very seasoned a lot because you have this savory steak coming on top, like so. Like that. And I have a little piece of the collard green or mushroom on top of the steak, and that's not for look. That's to keep the butter from sliding off. Nice garlic, butter with parsley, black pepper, and then you squeeze fresh lemon juice over the filet, and that soaks into that flour coating that you have. And that's Sicilian filet done Medusa style. One of my most popular dishes ever. I hope you try this recipe. It's fun making it in front of my friends, and I'll see you on the next episode of Medusa's Kitchen soon. Thank you. I'm Chef Greg.
Drop the mic. Encore.
So there we go. This is our Sicilian fillets on top of whipped potatoes and sauteed mushrooms with collard greens. Look at that.